all media reviews, 2013-2014 countdown, the top 5, and a little surprise after that. Also, quickly, I forgot to mention the last video. The self EP is called Super Fake Nice. Titles sometimes just go through my head, and I just think about that's the new record from the artist. So it's called Super Fake Nice. Anyway, just for all intents and purposes. So number 5 on the countdown, a band called The Family Crest with the album Beneath the Brine, which, and I would say my favorite song, the best song maybe, is the title track, which is the opening song. Very symphonic. This is a very symphonic band. You call it chamber rock of sorts. I've really gotten into a band out of, they're from Portland, they're from San Francisco, a band from Portland though called Typhoon, and that's the band who I would say they remind me most of. But people that like The Deer Hunter, or Sufjan Stevens, Anathello, there's a whole bunch of bands that have, some other bands loosely like The Decemberists that use chamber instruments in their sound. Margaret Lucas So-and-so's. These guys are kind of in that vein, but the singer, Liam, has a really great emotional voice. He uses falsetto well. But I would say that the title track is the opening track. Title track is the best moment of this record, but I made a video that I didn't actually share, but I did talk about that in this. When I was doing that in a previous video, I was going to show. They have, among the 8 touring or 9 tour members, they have all these other people that perform. It's like 80 people. So they're really into just adding everything in the kitchen sink into their sound, and yet their songs are still just terrific. But I guess in terms of other songs, The World, Love Don't Go. Love Don't Go was a single, and it has this piano part that just is just catchy and memorable at the very end, which is repeated, I think, on guitar and then vocals. Dun 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 dun, whatever. But Howl is another track. It's very almost ragtime, or something you'd hear like out of like a someone telling a tall tale in a tavern or something. I don't know. The Family Crest opened for a band called Mother Falcon, and I had never heard of them, but I was going to see Mother Falcon because I knew Mother Falcon. Mother Falcon's another band who uses like 20 or 30 musicians on their albums, and a lot of elements between flute and violin and cello and vocal harmonies and 3 or 4 different singers. So Family Crest are similar in that vein, but I can't really say enough good things about this, but I'd just say just to listen to it. I can't really pinpoint a lot of just individual elements of it. It's just a record that got better with time, and that's why it's number 5. I mean, relatively, but and they're working on a new record already. It may not come out until 2016 per se, or the 2015, whatever. But talking to the members when I saw them for the second time this year, a couple months ago, that's supposed to blow this album out of the water. So I love The Deer Hunter. So people that love like maybe the Act 1 and Act 2 elements of The Deer Hunter might totally love this, although I suggested to some of the Deer Hunter fans, and some of them liked it, and a friend of mine who loves the Deer Hunter loved it, but that's not like everyone. I could say the same thing about Typhoon, but it would be nice to see them catch on the way Typhoon has, and they have to a point. I think National Public Radio featured them, but we'll see. I think they have a bright future, the Family Crest. So that's number 5. Number 4 is The Return, the first album in 10 years, which seemed like in this past season there were a lot of like reunion, like Enchant, and Self, like I mentioned. There's a couple other Big Wreck, who was also I mentioned in the first video, and this band, The Tea Party. Big Wreck and The Tea Party both being from Canada. They put out their first record since 2004. The album's called The Ocean at the End. The Tea Party are a band from Canada who go back to the early 90s or late 80s, actually, when they formed, I would guess. I've always described them loosely as basically if you took Jim Morrison and had him sing with like Led Zeppelin, specifically the Led Zeppelin 3 era, the acoustic Middle Eastern element. And they, after the first couple of Tea Party records, they went and did some different things using electronics and experimented with other things. But after 2004, we didn't really know what their future was. This lead singer has a solo career, and then it turned out him and I think the whole band may have moved down to Australia. So this got maybe more publicity in Australia than anywhere else, and they have toured their native Canada. They only did a couple of shows in the U.S. for this album at this point, but maybe next year 2015, they'll end up doing some shows in the U.S. if their visas allow that. But this is really a great comeback record, a concept of some kind. The first single, Waters on Fire, is probably still my favorite moment because it has these kind of soaring vocal parts that just very emotional. It's kind of a trip. I don't know how long this record is. Maybe it's an hour, maybe it's 45, 50 minutes, somewhere in that range, but I hate to use the word epic too much, but overuse the word epic, but it's epic. The whole record is. It's a very much of a Journey album. The Makers, a Daniel Lanois cover, that's a very nice ballad that fits on this. Brazil uses some really interesting percussion. I'll say that the obvious kind of moments that I really love the Tea Party, the Led Zeppelin almost references at points, I'm a sucker for. It's not just a rip-off, but it's more of a tribute, but it's still kind of them doing like a modern take on Zeppelin with that kind of acoustic and twangy guitar and the riffs you just can't get out of your head. And then they talked about being influenced by like the likes of Jethro Tull and I think Pink Floyd especially. And there's definitely some kind of subtle or more mesmerizing psychedelic elements in here too. The Black Sea, kind of a darker track. The 11th Hour. The title track, the last track, if I'm not mistaken, is kind of long. Anyway, it's not my number one record, although at one point I thought it might be, but really great to see the Tea Party back. I hope this means they're going to be putting out a new record, more records. This is not the last, but I also thought for a moment that the ocean at the end sort of suggests it's like the end, but it's a return in a sense. So I think they actually, because they got back together, they weren't really in contact that much, but the last few years they've gotten back together. They put out a live album, I think it was, a few years ago from Australia, so that kind of inspired them to write this and record this album, and we may see more from the Tea Party, thankfully. Maybe it's like a second revival, renaissance for them. So Tea Party, the ocean at the end. Okay, I don't have number 3 in physical form at this point, although I may be picking it up rather soon, but Anathema, I mentioned in the last video briefly about K-Scope, their album Distant Satellites, which I grew to love, especially the last couple of Anathema records, like many people like the last 3, including Falling Deeper, but especially We're Here Because We're Here, and I really like Weather Systems, although everyone loves Weather Systems, it seems like. Not everyone, but a lot of people that have gotten into Anathema the last few years really have talked about Weather Systems being one of their favorite records ever. I tend to be the opposite. I think We're Here Because We're Here is not my favorite record ever, but their greatest work, at least the modern Anathema. But this new record, Distant Satellites, I kind of would say is partially like both Weather Systems, closer to Weather Systems and We're Here Because We're Here, but also a little new kind of. They talked about the Kavanagh brothers. One of the Kavanagh brothers talked about being influenced by electronic music and also Seeds of Peace, the Tom York project. But I think it just works. I think the reason why Distant Satellite works is just it still has that emotional melancholy element that I loved about the last few records they put out. The title track, yeah, the Lost Song Suite, and then I think especially the title track actually, that even though it's kind of synthy, I never can get that melody the way he used it out of my head. It's very sad. I'm just like, I'm not in tears, but I feel so sad after hearing that frequently because it's almost like an end of an era, the beginning of another. The self-titled song they also released, which that also it sounds like it's like they're talking about their band name, the history of the band, and how they're going from one sound to the next. And then especially, I think the best song on this album, I should have mentioned before, Aerial. After revisiting Distant Satellites this past week, Aerial still is my favorite song. The vocals, the kind of climactic, just soaring vocal parts. Is it sad music? Yes, but sometimes you like to listen to sad music. I like to listen to sad music, and it's not something I want to. Like Brave from Marillion, I can't listen to because it really does get me bawling, or blubbering. But that I have to say that Distant Satellites has a lot of what those other two records. In fact, it finishes higher, partly to do with the year, but than those other records did in their respective seasons or years. But if I had to rank the three, I probably would go We're Here Because We're Here, Weather Systems, Distant Satellites at this point, but it's pretty close. And even Falling Deeper, which is the remake of a re-recording of rearrangements of one of their earlier doom metal records. So anyway, didn't quite win, but it was really up there. It was one of those records that I still listen to frequently throughout the year, and I can anticipate, or I will anticipate listening to frequently. If I listen to Anathema, I might listen to that. I might listen to all three records. Who knows? Number two, one of my favorites, who I think 2014 was probably the most buzz they've ever received, and this is their album Animals from Canadian, Vancouver, Canada's own Ben Sinister. Is this the best Ben Sinister album? At first, I actually almost thought it was. Now I'm kind of like, well, I love Ben Sinister, but it's still like my third favorite. But it was probably my favorite record most of the year, although I don't say, again, I'm not comparing to the rest of their catalog, just comparing it to like classic records and how addictive it became. It wasn't as addictive as I thought it was going to be. But the first song, Best of You, might be one of, if not the best song they've ever written, though. It's a sweet, like 9 minutes, and it has very interesting, introspective, or relatable lyrics. But I would say, again, another record that I don't really feel like skipping tracks. A lot of energy tracks, whether it be I Got Love, Thunder and Lightning, Teacher, 17. It Will Never End. It's another song that that song almost does put me to tears. I don't know why. It's just little things about something never ending that you don't want it to end, or something that you want to get, like if you're sick or something, like I've been dealing with all these ailments, never ends. So it's almost relatable in a lot of respects for me. It's interesting. I'm looking at this. This is 8 tracks on here, and I didn't even realize this, but there may be a song missing, but I'm not sure. Anyway, but it's, I mean, they put out Small Fame a couple years ago, and I like that record probably about as much as this. It's probably a toss-up. There isn't as much power pop on this record as that record, but there's more just kind of really good, energetic rock riffs and organ parts, like Deep Purple-ish organ parts. And I mean, Dan Moxon's really never sounded better vocally. So, and I'm really, really thankful that they were able to get exposure through opening for Flying Colors and Big Elf, and hopefully that exposure will become even more widespread. And the fact that they have widespread in the U.S. rather, in North America, but outside of Canada. The fact that they have work visas, they paid for work visas, I think it's generally overall, turning out to be for the benefit, for the good. They played South by Southwest the last 2 or 3 years, so they're getting exposure to people that have never heard them. Even though they're pretty well known in Canada, I mean relatively, but they've had their success. They've been around 15 years, so but I think maybe it's just a little late coming for a band that is finally starting to break some inroads into North America, to Europe. Over in Europe, they opened for Flying Colors and Big Elf, and I mean, on a relative scale, I don't know if they're going to become, as big as I don't know who it would be the Decemberists or something like that. But I just think that they're too good of a band to just be completely unknown and so obscure that, and it's baby steps. I think the Deer Hunter is a good example where the Deer Hunter is not hugely popular, but they have a little bit of a following. People actually know who I'm talking about when I talk to them at concerts about the Deer Hunter. In a couple of years, the same thing hopefully will be said for Ben Sinister. And Animals certainly is among their best records, though with my own fanboy bias for like 8+ years, saying this, they don't have a bad record. Through the Broken City and Stories of Brothers, I want those 2 records on vinyl, and I would put those up against almost any record the last 15 years. So, not every record, but among them. And something that should be on my blog soon, in the next month or 2, or even sooner. So, all right, number 1, the top record, Fiacra's Thought Steps. I finally ordered it and picked it up. I got it digitally way early in the year. Fiacra is a singer-songwriter, originally from Ireland. He's Irish, I believe, but he now resides in some part of England. This is not technically a debut EP, but sort of is a debut EP, because the first EP put out a couple years ago, barely anyone knew about unless you knew the label it was released under. So a couple of the songs on Thought Steps were on that record. I don't know if they were remastered on this thing or not. That Old Time Nook and Slyrix, I believe it is, or Slyrix. But why it's number one, it's kind of by default because I listen to the hell out of this thing, even though I'll fully admit that I could not understand half the lyrics, if not more. But this guy is such a inventor and boundary pusher, I would say, in a lot of ways. I've never heard anything really quite like him. I mean, I mentioned Major Parkinson. Someone was talking about Fiacre earlier this year, and they said they like Major Parkinson more. And so I had to check out Major Parkinson, and there are some similarities. Like Fiacre is one guy, and then they have band members. But the one guy admitted, and I think he posted about being a huge fan of Faith No More and Mike Patton. But this style-wise on this is the Thought Steps. It really is a mixture of about 10 or 20 or 30 genres, but most notably pop, trance, or some old kind of big band jazz. And like an extreme metal or experimental, it's not like overly technical, but at points it does get kind of crazy. The vocals are sung so fast at some points, it just, I mean, I guess I'll try to just read off, now that I got the booklet that I can actually read the lyrics. But the main chorus, if I can actually read this, because I'm reading this partially in the dark. I don't know what to think, I don't know what to do, information overload is frying my mind right up. We're all just souls in a ball floating through infinite loops, so what's with the fuss, y'all? Which I thought he was saying something a little bit different, which I put on the blog, and I think I'll admit I may have to go in and edit some of those lyrics just because I couldn't find them online, and I couldn't figure out all of them. Not only the first track, the best song I've heard this year, what's it called? Not Infinite Loops. Infinite Loops, rather. Infinite Loops. But he reminds me of, I don't know, it's such a catchy song, such an energetic song. It has such a twist and turns, like the emotional highs and lows. The trance part and like sort of distorted vocals and some of the rapping. The biggest criticism I've seen from trying to suggest this artist to people is that they don't like the fact he raps. Which there's actually two bonus tracks that aren't actually listed on the CD. One of them is pretty much blatantly rapping, but I wouldn't call it rapping. I would call it more like just speaking in a rhythm. But I mean, what is rapping, I guess? I don't know. It doesn't sound like, urban rap or gangster rap or, a lot of things you think of for rap and hip-hop. Although that's just generalizing, of course. I'm not the biggest expert on rap and hip-hop. I like some old school stuff and like Immortal Technique, but I would just say, though, that the rap element or the speaking element is just subtle and it doesn't detract from the song. He still is very much focused, number one, on how good is the song. Is there things memorable with the song? Is it the melody? Is there something emotional? Is there a strong riff? Any rapping that's used, it's used just for the context of the song, and it works to me. I'll page down just to name the specifics on those bonus tracks that I mentioned. I'm thinking of Psycho for the Sake of It and mostly Spread the Sweat. And those are, I think, two older songs anyways. So I don't know if, like, the style of Fiacre's music, since this is only a 5-track EP, Thought Steps, if the rap part of his music's going to be limited, if gone in the future, because he just put out about 3 songs recently online for the Mellow Sound sessions, which don't have any of it in it, but maybe that's suggested based on the title, Mellow Sound. But I actually think if he loses the rap element, if you call it rap, it probably would not be as good. It makes him unique in that sense. I did mention Kevin Gilbert, of course. Kevin Gilbert, my favorite singer-songwriter ever. The song, the first song, Infinite Loops, I think reminds me all too much, in a good way, of Kevin Gilbert's song Shadow Self. Very introspective, very much masochistic almost in a way, but very, like, it's, I don't want to call it schizophrenic or manic depressive or bipolar, whatever you want, what other elements he's using to portray in that song, but relatable in some respects to me, but more just interesting analysis of the human psyche. But I would say among the others, I mean, the second song, Love Thrust Burn, has some huge moments, both with, trance and heavy riffs and some odd time signatures and just unexpected moments. Just where did that come from? And jazz elements. The jazz part, I think, is maybe the biggest kicker for me, why I was even curious. Some people compared him to like Prince, because you think about Prince's music, he has a lot of jazz in his music, and he's a lot of funk and rock at points, blues at points, and soul and R&B. So, what is Fiacre if he adds jazz to these other styles like pop and trance and metal? It's if you can do that while doing this, the songwriting ends up working and not just something about the songs being annoying. You got gold to me. You know what you're doing. You totally got me. I don't know if people are going to catch on to Fiacre, but I wonder if every 10 years, like in the 90s it was Marillion, I think, maybe some other people, but Marillion was maybe the artist, the band that stood out and just totally spoke to me and I became just attached to. In the 2000s, I think it was Kevin Gilbert for the most part. There were some others, but Kevin Gilbert still would be the top of that list, with the Apes and Androids connection maybe quite close second. This might be the guy. We'll see. It's a little premature because we only have one EP to go on. And in other years, if other records had come out, I probably would have really had a hard time putting an EP at the top spot. John Arch's EP in 2003 was my favorite record, the Twist of Fate, but that was just longer than the 27 minutes. And this is in some ways longer than the whatever 30 some odd minutes it clocks in at. If you include the 2 extra bonus tracks, it's probably 30 some odd minutes. But it was addictive. It just was really addictive and a great energy. Great sort of emotional highs and lows. And I mean, I'll admit, some of it is like you see other people talking about music, they're just praising to no end, and I'm just like, yeah, but I'm praising this thing, and whether you do or not, it doesn't really matter to me, except the fact I know I'm going to question and compare what someone else likes and this, and to see if I like it more. If other people like it more, great. If they don't, that's their own taste. It doesn't really matter, but I don't know what aspirations Fiacre has in the long term, but I think in terms of an artist, an ambitious artist, the sky is the limit. If he goes the way of like Warpaint or St. Vincent or some other artist that I used to love, Russian Circles, that's fine. But at this point, he's pretty much a can't go wrong artist for me right now. Just having the one EP and then releasing now 3 songs on YouTube and some covers. He did a cover of a MGM song, which I like, but my girlfriend says is way too similar to the original. And he did a cover of "Happy Together" by the Turtles, actually. So, anyway, Fiacre, Thought Steps, my favorite on the All Media Reviews blogs, top release of 2013-2014. Now, as a bonus, I'm taking a liberty. This probably wouldn't have defeated Fiacre, but this came on. I was just introduced the last month or so to this group called Nordic Giants by K-Scope, who also introduced me to I Am the Morning, who also has Anathema and Stephen Wilson and a lot of other artists, but from the UK. But Nordic Giants put out 2 EPs in 2013. They haven't put out a full-length record like Fiacre, but they put out these 2 EPs as a double vinyl. It's a cool-looking vinyl. Maybe I actually will open it up and show it. It's like a clear looking vinyl. Dismantle Suns and got the name of the other one, but. Anyway, looks all cool and clear and stuff like that. But, the clear part of it is a small, not the main reason why I purchased it, but it was, certainly an added bonus. And a gatefold like Family Crest and a lot of gatefold records that came out this year. But this came out in 2013 in October. This Dismantle Suns, what's the other half called? Build Seeds, Dismantle Suns. But I consider this, it came out before the deadline, so it would have been really in last year if the EPs were together, but I'm taking a liberty and just saying this is the most interesting thing I've come across that is recent. It wasn't released, even though it was technically like a compilation. But post-rock of some kind. They use trumpet, they use female vocals, different guest vocalists. They're from India and the UK, or both, I'm not sure. They have guests on this from other bands, but a lot of chamber instruments. I mean, if you like Sigur Rós, if you like, who is it? God is an Astronaut. That's definitely the closest. If you like bands, like post-rock bands that use samples from different recordings that have a good emotional element to them, just very good textures and atmosphere, and I'm literally in awe of this thing. I mean, granted, I've probably listened to it about a dozen times over the last 3 weeks, so I'm not listening to it as much now, but they have a full length that's I guess, expected in the next 12 or less months, sometime maybe early the next year in 2015. So I got high expectations for them. They use electronic elements at some point. It just this is post rock like I like it, how I like it, at least initially. If they continue to make records exactly like this, I don't know if I'm going to be like, well, I'm going to compare the two. But Nordic Giants, this UK/India post rock project that I'm very, very curious on what's going to happen. But I mean, I could just mention Neotene or Neotene or Neotenie would be one song. I think that's the one that talks about using going into space with the samples. Mechanical Mind, Strangest Tides, Little Bird. I mean, it's only 8 tracks, it's 2 EPs or 4 songs, but certainly something that I discovered, even though it was so late in the season, or could be currently the current next season. But I'm going to put it in this season because, it was a release. The double EP came out this season, so that's more than enough babbling on for all these videos. But thank you for watching them. If anyone does find this, they may find it a year from now or 2 years from now, or just check out the blog if you don't want to see some idiot just babbling on. But I hope to make more videos in the near future. I may make one, actually. I was just thinking about for previewing 2014, 2015, and using vinyls as a prop instead of not being lazy and just having to try to insert images and screwing around with that. As an artist that have records come out, because there's a whole bunch that didn't come out this past season that should be coming out, and there's already the records that came out in November, December, including Abel Viscaris and Thomas Giles from Between the Buried and Me, and Demian. So, but I'm going to hopefully be able to do videos more if I can get the time, based on my health, and especially based on what the girlfriend allows me to. But in the meantime, I'll see you later.